give people an understanding, let's just talk about, first of all, what is broadly speaking, what is anti-racism? I know you wrote how there are different strands of it. It's not necessarily a monolithic set of thought, but as best you can, if you broadly explained anti-racism, what is it?
There are different ways of looking at it, and any definition I give, someone's going to say, "Well, I'm an anti-racist. That doesn't describe me." So I think that my best way to find out what it is to read multiple anti-racists and see what strands tend to hold them together.
Mm-hmm.
Even acknowledging that there could be someone out there who says, "Well, I'm an anti-racist." That doesn't hold me. And I really come with three major principles from doing that. And the first is that racism is systematic and it's multifaceted and it's just incorporated to our society. The degree to which it's incorporated may vary from anti-racist to anti-racist, but all of them talk about how racism is not just an individual thing, it's systematic, it's institutionalized, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Second principle that I find among most, if not all, anti-racists is that we must be very proactive in addressing and attacking it. That is not acceptable just to sit back and say, well, it's out there. And in fact, Kendi argues there's no such thing as a non-racist. Either you're an anti-racist or you're a racist.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding racist not just meaning that you hate people of color, but that you're participating in a system of racism. So it's not necessarily your intent. That's the second thing. And then the third major principle I find, and once again, it varies in ways described, but I think it's pretty clear, is that the role of whites in dealing with anti-racism is to support people of color. And I think that's a really key element because the first two, racism is more than just individualistic and that we should address it. I could go along with that. The third one, I think, is the problem. The third one is that if you really read between the lines, is whites are not equals in dealing with anti-racism. Either because whites have been the beneficiaries of anti-racism and that they need to be held back, or because, that they don't fully understand it for whatever reason, whites are not the equals in dealing with anti-racism. Their role is to support people of color in their struggle in dealing with anti-racism. And I think that is the tenet of anti-racism that's problematic.
Yeah, interesting. Those are really salient thoughts right there. Very, very good. And so there are different strands. There's D'Angelo and whoever else. But what you argue in this article is you wrote, and while a lot of attention has deservedly gone to criticizing D'Angelo's ideas, I have concluded that the biggest threat to potential future racial peace is Kendi's assertions about what we must do to become an anti-racist society. So why is Kendi's anti-racism the biggest threat to racial peace in your mind?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one is social position, another is ideology. D'Angelo, and I don't want to read intentions into this, but I don't see D'Angelo trying to lead a revolution. She's pushing out certain ideas. I think they're toxic in nature, but she's pushing out certain ideas and she's pushing them out. Kendi, I think wants to lead a revolution. I mean, you read his book, he talks about how anti-racism can basically save the world as an anti-racist society. Furthermore, he's not just writing and talking. He's organizing. Recently, he got $10 million from some CEO from a social media company. I forget the name of the person now. Escapes me. And so Kendi has a Center for Anti-Racism at Boston University. You can get $10 million from one source like that. You can get a lot of money from other people because you can just go and say, hey, look, this person gave me $10 million. What are you going to do? I've learned enough how this works.
Mm-hmm. So
he can raise, I would say, almost unlimited funding. That's probably a little unfair, but a lot of money.
Yeah.
Has an organization. He's not just written his one book. He's written, other books, and not just books for adults. He's written books on how to do devotionals, in a sense, or journaling on anti-racism. Books for kids on anti-racism. his ideas, his social position, due to his own efforts, I think, is much bigger than D'Angelo's. Ultimately, even though D'Angelo's probably selling a few more books. So there's that. He's going to have a bigger impact for a long period of time. He's going to eventually gain more followers than D'Angelo, I believe. But then the ideas of Kendi. I think D'Angelo, at her worst, is going to poison relationships with some people adapting her ideas and trying to implement them and make things bad in that way. Kendi is more activistic, and he wants to change our society and change our government. And for me, the most dangerous idea he has, which I'm surprised that got a lot more pushback on, is this Department of Antiracism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know he can't actually do it, but he's going to push for it. And what this Department of Antiracism would be this government agency that has jurisdiction, federal, state, local, to alter any laws that deemed as racist. Now, before you say, well, that sounds pretty good, if someone tries to pass a law outlining interracial marriage, I want that law thrown out. Me too. I'm interracially married. But his definition of anti-racism is much more expansive than that. Read his book. Read his book on how to be anti-racist. He talks about anti-racist capitalism. Mm-hmm. So to be anti-racist is to be anti-capitalistic. He talks about anti-racism in gender roles and sexuality roles. So to be anti-racist is to be against these things as well. He even talks about, if you're not willing to engage in dealing with global warming, because global warming affects the non-white global South more than the white global South, then that's racist. To be anti-racist is to deal with global warming. Now, I'm not saying any of these things are wrong. All these things are wrong. They're controversial, and it's not a given that they're automatically right. So this Department of Antiracism, in theory, could not just speak to laws that directly impact on what we think about racism, but on global warming, on capitalism, on gender, on sexuality. It is, I would say, in essence, a Supreme Court controlled by anti-racists to go in and change laws as they want, as they see fit. That's an incredibly dangerous idea. And no, he's not going to get that. But this is the goal that he, with his organization in power, is shooting at. And a lot of people are going to go along this goal. And that's going to bring a lot of racial strife in our society. So this is why I think Kendi is more dangerous than D'Angelo.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I think that the Department of Antiracism, especially as you pointed out, I think rightly, is a very, very frightening idea. It sounds like, hello, fascism, anybody, Yeah. And that you point out in the article that in the way that he proposes it, it would be a department with no oversight. With no
oversight,
with no appointees.
No appointees. The appointees are people who are trained in anti-racism. Mm-hmm. So the appointees are people that obviously, So there's no chance of a future administration saying, "Look, you've gone too far. I'm gonna start putting people in there who's going to rein you back." They cannot be reined back. Mm-hmm. If he got his dream department. Yeah,
and then, unlike the Supreme Court, which, there's some checks and balances there because the justices do have to go through somewhat of a appointment process. They interpret laws according to their constitutionality, whereas what the Department of Antiracism would do would be evaluating laws and so on, and how acceptable or unacceptable they are to Ibram X. Kendi.
Yeah, or someone similar to his ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which probably would be someone influenced by Kendi. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, is it a power grab? Absolutely, and that power grab is part of what makes it very dangerous.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that, like you said, the possibility that a Department of Antiracism would actually be established is pretty unlikely. I agree with that. What I see or consider being much more likely is that it is, unofficially established just by the popularity of these ideas taking off with different people who are working in the various, bureaucratic offices and departments of the government, and then leaders in existing departments already starting to, run their department, whether it's the Department of Education, Transportation, whatever else, as if it is a Department of Anti-Racism.
Yeah, I think that's much more likely. Obviously, my fear is not we're going to have a Department of Anti-Racism 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or ever, because of all the barriers you have to go. I mean, you would literally need a constitutional amendment in order to establish this.
Mm-hmm.
But he is influencing people to think along these lines. Think about what it takes to say, look, I need a department that forces laws that I believe are right on, at the state, federal, local level. So you're not getting away from this if you're local, down, state, federal, local level. That's our mentality then, people will bring into their decisions they make in other parts of the government, in other ways in which they, perhaps in the ways in which they run their companies. And so there could, what I fear more than an actual department being established, which we agree is not going to happen, is an attitude of this is morally right. If you don't do this, you're morally wrong. You're, in a sense, maybe even evil. Even though Kendi does not use those terms, but I think people that would be the natural evolution of his ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I'm totally justified in doing whatever I can to stop you and to implement what I believe is morally wrong.
Yeah.
And that sort of attitude is much more likely to develop and have all sorts of repercussions in our society.